The morning light touched the quiet town and two souls walked side by side, their laughter soft like the breeze that moved through the trees. One of them was Arian, the boy with eyes that carried dreams like waves of an unseen ocean, and beside him walked Mira, a girl whose smile could melt even the silence of the coldest day. They had known each other since childhood, their stories tangled like the roots of an old tree, growing together through seasons of joy and pain, through the rain and the long afternoons where nothing mattered except the small moments they shared. They talked about everything and nothing, about the stars that looked close but were far beyond reach, about how someday they would leave this little place and chase the world beyond the hills. But for now they found comfort in the simplicity of being near each other. Their hearts spoke a language that words could never capture. One afternoon when the sky was heavy with clouds, Arian looked at Mira and said, maybe love is just friendship that forgot to stop. Maybe it kept walking until it realized it could not go back. Mira looked away, her eyes glistening with the kind of feeling she had never named. She wanted to say something, but silence felt safer. They both stood near the river watching how it flowed without asking where it was going. They wanted to be like that, free yet together, moving without fear of ending. The day turned to evening and they walked home slowly, the sound of their footsteps whispering to the ground like secrets never spoken. Days passed like soft wind that touches but never stays. Arian started writing letters to himself, letters he would never send, words about dreams, fears, and how every time he saw Mira the world seemed to pause, like it was waiting for them to understand something only hearts could hear. He did not call it love, he did not even dare to think of it that way, because friendship was beautiful and pure and he was afraid of losing it. But love has its own way of blooming quietly, between laughter and long gazes, between moments that stretch too long and words that stop too soon. One evening they went to the hill behind the old school where the sunsets always looked like a painting made just for them. The sky burned orange and gold, and Arian said, Mira, what do you think will happen if one day we are far from each other? Will we still be friends? Will we still remember these evenings? Mira smiled, but her voice trembled as she said, distance can change everything, but maybe real friendship never ends. Maybe it turns into something else, something that lives even when we are not near. They both sat in silence, the kind that speaks louder than any word, as the first stars began to appear and the wind carried the faint scent of rain. That night Mira could not sleep. She kept thinking about his words, about how his voice had sounded softer than usual, about how her heart had beaten faster when he looked at her. She wanted to tell him how she felt, but something inside whispered, not yet, not now. Maybe love was patient, maybe it waited for the right moment, and she decided to keep her heart quiet a little longer. She wrote in her diary that sometimes silence says everything. And somewhere across town Arian looked at the sky from his window and whispered her name softly, like it was a secret between him and the moon. Next morning the air smelled of jasmine and sunlight danced softly through the leaves as Mira walked towards the small park where she and Arian always met. He was already there, sitting on the old wooden bench sketching something in his notebook. His fingers moved gently over the page and the wind played with his hair. She watched him for a moment before speaking, her heart beating like a quiet drum. He looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that felt like home. She sat beside him and asked, what are you drawing? He turned the notebook toward her. It was a sketch of the river, the bridge, and two small figures standing close to each other, their outlines almost touching. She looked at it for a while and said softly, it looks like us. Arian nodded and said, maybe it is, or maybe it is just a memory that looks like us. She smiled, but inside her heart felt heavy because she knew memories have a way of fading even when love tries to hold them still. As the days turned to weeks, things began to change. Arian started preparing for college in another city far from the quiet town, while Mira stayed behind to help her family. She told herself it was fine, that they would always be connected no matter where life took them. But sometimes when the evening light fell across the empty bench, she felt a quiet ache deep inside her, a feeling she could not name. She missed the way he talked about dreams, the way he listened like every word mattered. She missed how everything seemed to make sense when he was near, but she never told him that because she did not want to make it harder for him to leave. On the last day before his departure they met by the river once again, the same place where countless memories were born. The air was cool, the sky dimming with the promise of rain. Arian looked at her and said, Mira, I don't know what to say because no word feels enough. She looked at him, her eyes filled with light and sorrow, and said, then don't say anything, just promise you will remember this place and this friendship. He smiled and said, I will remember everything, every laughter, every silence, every time you looked at the world and made it more beautiful. She wanted to hug him, but she stood still, afraid that if she touched him she might never let go. He gave her his sketchbook, the one filled with drawings of their memories, and said, keep this so that even when I am gone we will still share something that is ours. She took it with trembling hands and said, I will take care of it always. The rain began to fall softly at first, then harder, soaking their clothes and hair, but neither of them moved. They stood there as if the world had stopped around them. She looked into his eyes and for the first time saw the unspoken truth that lived between them, a truth made of love that had grown quietly in the corners of their friendship like wildflowers in the cracks of stone. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words drowned in the sound of the rain, so instead he smiled and turned away, walking slowly until he disappeared behind the mist of falling water. After he left, Mira would come to the river every evening, the sketchbook in her hand. She would sit on the same bench and draw new things: stars, flowers, waves, sometimes two figures still standing together even when everything else had changed. She never sent him a letter, though she wrote many. She would fold them carefully and keep them inside the book, hidden between pages, as if the words could reach him without traveling anywhere. She learned that love did not always need to be loud. Sometimes it lived quietly in the heart, whispering softly through time and distance. Months passed, seasons changed, the leaves turned gold, then brown, and the cold wind began to visit the town. Mira walked through life with grace, her smile still gentle, her eyes still full of dreams, but every time she looked at the horizon she thought of him, of how his voice had sounded when he spoke of the future. She wondered if he still remembered her, if he still sketched the river or looked at the stars the way they once did together. And even though she missed him, she was proud of him, proud that he was chasing what he always dreamed of, and somehow that pride softened the ache in her chest. One night as she sat by the window, the moonlight spilling over her diary, she opened the sketchbook again. The last page had a note she had never seen before. It said, "Sometimes distance is not a wall, it is a bridge that teaches hearts how to find each other again." She read it again and again, tears falling silently on the page, and in that moment she knew their story was not over, that love like theirs does not end, it just waits quietly for the right time to return. Part 3. Years moved like waves, quiet but unstoppable, and life carried both of them forward. Arian now lived in a busy city surrounded by tall buildings and endless lights, but sometimes when the noise faded he still felt the soft whisper of the river from his hometown. He still saw her face in the crowd of strangers, and he still carried the memory of that rain-soaked evening in the corners of his heart. He had achieved much, he studied hard, painted exhibitions, opened new doors, but somewhere deep inside he always felt that something was missing, something he left behind with her, Mira, on that quiet riverbank. Mira too had grown, her art had become known in small circles. People admired the beauty of her drawings, not knowing they were born from memories of someone who once drew beside her. She still lived in the same town, her life gentle and slow, yet every painting she made carried a piece of him, the curves of his laughter, the warmth of his presence, the ache of distance she had never forgotten. She never tried to, because forgetting him would mean erasing the most beautiful part of her own soul. One summer evening the town hosted an art festival, and Mira's paintings were displayed in the small gallery near the river. She stood there among people who admired her work, yet her heart wandered to the door, hoping maybe by some miracle he would walk in and see how her colors spoke of him. Far away in the city, Arian found a letter in his old bag. One Mira had once slipped there without him noticing. It was written long ago, before he left. It said, "If someday you forget who you are, come back to the river, it remembers both of us." He held the letter close for a long moment, and then without hesitation he packed his things and took the first train home. The journey felt like a dream, the trees, fields and sky all familiar yet distant. When he finally arrived the evening light was soft and golden. He walked through the quiet streets until he reached the gallery, and there among the paintings he saw her standing near a canvas that showed two figures beneath a rainy sky, just like that last day. She turned slowly, and for a moment they only looked at each other. Time stood still, the years between them dissolving like mist. He smiled gently and said, "I found your letter and the river called me back." She laughed softly, tears in her eyes, and said, "I knew it would someday." They walked out together to the riverside where it all began, the same bench, the same breeze, the water still whispering to the shore. The silence between them was full of everything they never said. She looked at him and said, "You never really left, did you?" He shook his head and said, "No, because you were always with me in every sketch, every dream, every quiet night." They sat close, not needing words, their hearts speaking in the rhythm of the flowing water. The sun sank slowly, painting the sky in gold and pink, and the world seemed to breathe with them. He reached for her hand gently, like one touches something sacred, and she did not pull away. Their fingers intertwined softly as if they had always belonged there. In that simple touch, all the distance, all the waiting, all the unspoken love melted away. They watched the river move endlessly and knew that life would still carry them forward, but now together. As the stars appeared, Mira whispered, "Maybe love is not something that begins or ends, maybe it just exists quietly between two hearts that never stop remembering." Arian looked at her and said, "Maybe love is what friendship becomes when it learns to breathe without fear." And they both smiled, the kind of smile that needed no promise, no forever, just the truth of now. The night deepened and the moonlight spread across the water. They sat there listening to the gentle sound of the river that had witnessed their laughter, their silence, their waiting. It felt as if the whole world had finally found its peace. In that moment they understood that love did not need grand declarations, it only needed two souls who chose to stay connected no matter how far life tried to pull them apart. And as the wind whispered through the trees, the stars above seemed to bow softly to their quiet love. Two friends who had walked through time and distance to find that what was once friendship had become something eternal, something pure, something beautiful beyond words. And in the heart of the night the river kept flowing, carrying their story into forever.